Let me give you a little bit of advice. As you sit down to write your memoir, think of it as if you were writing a novel. What I mean by that is don't think of it as an essay on yourself. Think of it in terms of what will attract an audience. Why do I mention this? Because when a reader is looking for a good memoir to read, chances are they are not looking for a story about you. They're looking for a story about themselves. The difference between a memoir and an autobiography is that the autobiography is the story of your life. A memoir is a curated collection of your memories to tell a story. So before you sit down to write, you need to decide what story you intend to tell. The story a reader buys your book to hear. Unless you're already a famous person, they're not actually looking to read about you. Let me explain. This is Julie Smith. She's a 40-something mom of 4 sons, one of whom is on the autism spectrum. She had a middling career in advertising before leaving to start her own business, which is thriving. She got divorced last year and is now navigating online dating for the first time. And since the divorce, she also stepped away from the Methodist Church, which she was raised in, and is now exploring the Universalist Unitarian religion. Julie has a lot going on in her life and definitely has a lot to write about. So she has no problem writing her memoir, chapter by chapter, filling the pages with her life's hard-won lessons. Now she's done with her draft and plans to self-publish. So what's the problem? When Julie sits down to write her back cover blurb, she realizes her mistake. She has no idea who she's targeting with this book. Since Julie is just a regular person, no one is going to Amazon to search for Julie Smith. So what are they searching for? Books about raising children with autism are a good idea, but Julie only mentioned her child's special needs sparingly, so the book isn't really about him. She spent a full chapter talking about her transition from a 9-to-5 to starting her own business, but again, it's only one chapter. A good chunk of the middle of the book is about her divorce, her custody battle, and dating after 40. Maybe she can target those readers. But in order to do that, those readers will have to slog through the first 5 chapters of the book, which are about her upbringing as a Methodist, and also her time on the cheer squad. You see the problem. Julie hasn't really written a memoir. She didn't decide on the story she wanted to tell right off the bat. The good news is, you're not going to make that same mistake. Some of you may know immediately what you're writing about. You're writing about addiction, or escaping a cult, or starting your life over from scratch after a partner's unfaithfulness. Some of you have that kind of clarity, but others may not. So, how do you find the clarity? There are 2 ways. One takes longer than the other, but they're both effective. The first way is to write out a list of every scene you want to write about. Those moments rattling around in your head that you're aching to put on paper. If you plan to use this method, I attached a worksheet in the lesson for you to use, but honestly, you can use any old sheet of paper. List out all the events, preferably in chronological order. And once you're done, look for patterns. What do you most commonly write about? Family conflict, overcoming adversity, finding the silver lining in difficult circumstances? Or maybe something as simple as putting your needs aside to help others. Find those patterns and see the story you should be focusing on. The second way to find your story is usually a shorter process, and that is by thinking about your ideal reader. Who are you targeting with your book? Business owners, parents, maybe specifically dads who own their own businesses. Who do you think would benefit the most from your story? Deciding on who would most benefit from your book, or would be most likely to go looking for your story, is often a shortcut to identifying the theme of your memoir. What you actually want to write about dictates everything: which scenes you include, the order you present them in, how much detail you go into about certain parts of your life. The story you choose and the readers you target help you decide the emotional impact you're going for. Whether you seek to inspire the reader, spur them into action, or maybe just give them a good old-fashioned cautionary tale. Settling on your memoir's theme is the first step toward all of these details falling into place. What type of memoir am I writing? Memoirs are a wide-ranging genre, and there are several types. For instance, here are just a few for you to consider. The personal memoir. This is the most common type of memoir. The author has had a particular experience such as abuse, divorce, illness, or addiction. The memoir centers around this particular experience, and scenes are chosen based upon how they help flesh out this one experience. What led to it? What was the actual event like? And what was the aftermath? An example of a personal memoir is Inside the Kingdom by Carmen bin Laden. Next is the portrait memoir. Most memoirs are an author writing about him or herself. However, a portrait memoir is about the experiences of a person who is not the author. It's often a close friend, a mentor, or a relative. These are most often written in the third person, as a novel would be. An example of this is Pieces of My Mother, a memoir by Melissa Sistaro. The coming-of-age memoir centers around the author's transition from childhood to adulthood, often including deep POV work, transporting the reader back to childhood or adolescence. An example of this is Mississippi Sissy by Kevin Sessoms. Try saying that 5 times fast. A confessional memoir often straddles the line between memoir and self-help, as the author focuses on wrongs they have committed and how he or she came back from the brink, made improvements in their life, and also amends with their loved ones. An example of this type of memoir is Got the Life by Fieldy, the musician from Korn. The travel memoir, as suggested by the title, focuses on the writer's experiences while traveling, whether one or many different places. An example would be Sunburned Country by Bill Bryson. Finally, the spiritual quest memoir focuses on the search for spiritual meaning and purpose. The writer is a spiritual seeker who may be examining one or more organized religions, or may be seeking a less structured form of spirituality. An example of this would be My Sisters, the Saints, a spiritual memoir. Now that you have the techniques to determine your story and possible classifications for your completed memoir, let's move on to the tools. In the lesson module, you'll find 3 documents. The first is the scene worksheet I mentioned earlier. I also included 2 guided exercises to help you flesh out the purpose behind your book, the story you need to tell. Even if you don't take time to do those exercises now, I recommend saving them to your own computer and maybe printing them off for easy access.